I was up before the sun in Staunton, Virginia on February 10th, 2023. After spending 5 days chasing trains across all corners of Pennsylvania, I was excited for some short line action in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. After swinging by the Shenandoah Valley Railroad shops, I swung over to those of the Buckingham branch about 3,000 feet to the west. Staunton provides incredible variety in train traffic, with 2 short lines, Amtrak and CSX, all making multiple daily appearances. I found the latter only a couple minutes later at the BB shops as a westbound hopper train was preparing to enter the Shenandoah Valley. Although I wanted to focus on the 2 resident short lines, I couldn't pass up the sunrise vista in Hebron. There's less than 4 miles of track between this hillside and the BB shops, and I thought this was just a sublime way to start the day. Waking up early always does a rail fan good. Further speaking to Staunton's railroad variety, it would be only 8 months later that I was back on this hillside watching N&W 611 lead the famous Shenandoah Valley Limited excursions. I didn't know that's what the future held when I filmed this hopper train, but I did know that if I ever came back to Staunton, I wanted to end up right back on the Hebron Hill. The beautiful colors of a winter sunrise made the scene that much better as the rolling hills of the Shenandoah Valley came to life for the day. When on these road trips, the feeling of experiencing such beauty and tranquility in faraway places is one of my favorites. I had this notion on the Snowy Hill in Tunkhannock, the Cross Creek in Avella, and Cliffside on Bennington Curve, and now again in Hebron. It's extremely fulfilling to know that you've witnessed something so beyond your usual scope, and one of my favorite aspects of a railfan road trip. It was made possible today by an empty grain train likely out of Norfolk, running west via the Buckingham branch's old Clinchfield and Ohio main line. CSX runs bi-directionally east and west through Virginia, with westbound empty unit trains taking the aggressively profiled Buckingham branch, while all manifests and eastbound unit trains take the gentler route along the James River and Rivanna subdivisions. This interesting routing is accomplished by BB leasing their Richmond and Allegheny division from the Class 1, operating across 3 CSX subdivisions between Richmond and Clifton Forge, uncoincidentally the 2 endpoints of the bidirectional running. CSX trains operating over the BB identify themselves by their lead engine and directional heading, with CSX 5446 West making a wonderful debut for my Shenandoah Valley railfanning. After 5446 West, I decided to double back to the Shenandoah Valley Railroad shops. Owned by Cass Scenic's parent company, the Durbin and Greenbrier Valley Railroad, the SVRR shops are home to an incredible mix of Alco and EMD locomotives. At the time of my visit, these engines came in paint schemes of the Canadian National, B&O, Western Maryland, and even an old F7 from a Texas-based excursion operator. Today's power was high hood Alco RS11M number 367. Built in 1958, the RS-11 is amazingly SVRR's youngest operating locomotive and their only operating Alco. It was a treat to hear the trademark chug of the American Locomotive Company as Engine 367 prepared the day's train. The Shenandoah Valley Railroad runs just over 20 miles of trackage between their two interchange points, with the Buckingham branch in Staunton and Norfolk Southern in Pleasant Valley. There are not many customers on the line, however, enthusiastic leadership has kept the railroad chugging for years, providing variety to the Durbin and Greenbrier Valley's portfolio. Speaking of variety, the N&W hamburger logo still bled through on 367's long hood, which still wears its as-delivered colors. As the SVRR continued shuffling, I decided to switch gears for the Buckingham branch. I know ditching an N&W Alco is shameful to say the least, but I knew the scenery and train action to be more bountiful on the BB. I was happy to have made the shift as I raced to catch the morning's second westbound unit train. I did so in between the communities of Swope and Buffalo Gap, with the rolling hills and mountains providing a beautiful backdrop. one SD70 MACE was all this 98-car train needed, although the rebuilt EMD certainly had a hard morning climbing the Buckingham branch. We're on the west end of the North Mountain subdivision, which runs between Gordonsville and Clifton Forge. Although it's the only portion of the BB I've railfanned, there are few places more scenic than the North Mountain sub, and I was giddy that the morning had been lucrative thus far. Swope is near the westernmost ruling grade on the subdivision's namesake North Mountain, an intense climb west as the tracks exit the valley and enter the Virginia Blue Ridge Mountains. Remarkably enough, this is not even the steepest grade on the North Mountain sub, as Waynesboro's Blue Ridge Tunnel hosts an incredible nearly 1.7% grade. Although steep, these hills pose little threat to most of Buckingham Branch's road freights, as the railroad has a healthy amount of power and their trains routinely run at less than 20 cars. While both sides of the North Mountain grade are around the same incline, unit CSX freights heading east towards Norfolk are always loaded, and the mixed bag of manifest consists means that the empty unit westbounds are all the Class 1 can route over the Richmond and Allegheny due to its aggressive profile. That said, I was quite shocked to see a single rebuild in charge of today's C001, especially given how it was an Amtrak day, which meant time is of the essence. When the railroad is moving quickly, so am I, landing in Craigsville about 14 miles farther towards Clifton Forge. Sliding down the west side of North Mountain meant the 4584 could now use its own weight as an advantage, as the crew hustled to make Clifton Forge before Amtrak did. Because of siding lengths on the R&A, organizing meets between CSX and Amtrak is avoided as much as possible, a race that only happens 3 times a week due to the frequency of Amtrak's tri-weekly Cardinal. As this is BB-controlled territory, the short line likes to only run CSX around sunrise through Staunton, but this extra coal train speaks to the railroad's flexibility. The BB dispatcher was hustling C001 along as fast as possible in order to mitigate a meet with the Cardinal, as the empty rapid discharge hoppers rattled the town of Craigsville 98 times over. C001 was one of an exciting 3 freight trains on the North Mountain sub this morning, as I finally caught up to the weekday Buckingham Branch local in Bells Valley. The crew of train Z631 was just as surprised by the coal train's presence as I was, having followed this morning's grain train out of Staunton and pulling off in Bells Valley to accommodate C001's sprint. Growing up in Florida, I always thought the RDL hoppers were specifically assigned to the Tampa Electric Company's Big Bend power plant. Once requiring nearly daily train arrivals, I believe Big Bend has converted to more sustainable fuel sources, which has likely thrown the RDL hoppers into servicing a larger pool of power plants. This specific set was coming out of the Wheelwright power plant south of Richmond, heading west into the Alleghenies to help ensure the households of the Old Dominion stayed warm on this chilly February morning. While the BB may have thought otherwise, I was quite pleased that CSX threw an extra westbound towards the North Mountain sub this morning. This allowed me to chase a train while I caught up to my ultimate goal of the day, the Buckingham Branch Railroad. The crew had rights onto the main line shortly after C001's passage, with 2 consecutively numbered GP40s on the point. Running weekdays as a turn job out of Staunton, train Z631 works customers as far as Goshen while routinely running to the CSX interchange in Clifton Forge. The train's largest customer lies in Goshen and provides a majority of 631's traffic, being gondolas for rail tie producer Stella Jones. After working and waiting in Bells Valley, Stella Jones was all the BB crew had left on their switch list, coasting into Goshen only a couple miles later. If you consider yourself a rail fan, the town of Goshen likely rings a bell, as not 8 months later it would be the home of Norfolk and Western 611, the Queen of Steam. That arrangement was far from final when I visited in February, where the scene was made up of a much different set of historic rolling stock alongside the Goshen Industrial Track. Having split off the main, I set up for Z631 as they wandered engines light along the industrial track. If you told me that I'd be back in 8 months to watch 611 on this exact piece of railroad, I would have fallen out of my chair. What was then Fields and Forestry is now the Buckingham Branch's Victoria Station, having been raised along the right-of-way to accommodate the giant J and the massive crowd that would follow her. It's crazy how only a few months can produce the wildest results on the railroad, but for now I was still more than content on the Virginia mountainsides. Stella Jones is a short hop west of here, where the local crew would perform some switching, assembling a train of finished ties produced in Goshen. Stella is the largest customer on this side of Staunton and sees regular service from the Buckingham branch in order to keep their ties circulating all throughout the CSX system. While Z631 worked the stub end industry, I had myself an incredible truck bed picnic as I took in the extreme tranquility of the Shenandoah countryside. Z631 kindly waited until I was finished eating to pull out of Stella Jones as I watched from my roadside dining table. I always think it's cool to see oddball consists like this, made up purely of railroad ties for track construction. It's not something I think about too often, but the best way to move railroad infrastructure components is often by the rails themselves, and it's neat to see industries in such faraway lands like Goshen providing the service. Stella Jones produces rail ties for use all across America, publicly traded and shipping a number of their residential and construction-grade lumber products by rail as well. It's all ties on this train today as I followed Z631 into downtown Goshen. I say that with air quotes. I quickly repositioned myself in Bells Valley for Z631's return trip to Staunton, although the surprises weren't over for me yet as I was happily caught off guard by another one of the railroad's westbounds. This is one of the Buckingham branch's scenic trains out of Staunton, operated by the Virginia Scenic Railway as the Allegheny Special to Goshen and back. Officially train X450, the Allegheny Special is a Thursday through Sunday morning run made up of one engine and one car. The freight train had held off in Goshen and was back up to speed through Bells Valley shortly after the scenic train. Having not delivered the westbound consist and leaving the Stella Jones outbounds in Goshen, I was puzzled to find Z631 traveling light once again towards home base in Staunton. It was, however, a beautiful day for some train chasing, especially driving through the George Washington National Forest. The forest lets out on the east side into the rolling farmlands of Swope, which found me perched over the tracks to wait on both of the returning BB trains. The Shenandoah Valley is truly like no other, with the light engines providing an excellent excuse to stay a little longer. All good things in life must come to an end, and that included this Railfanning road trip. While I still had another day trackside in Virginia on the docket, I had an overwhelming feeling of success here in Swope and wanted to end on a good note. I had also been on the road for a week at this point with little human contact and was ready to be back in Wilmington. The promise of one more train through Swope kept me around for just a tad longer though, as I knew the Allegheny Special wouldn't be far behind the freight crew. Watching the Buckingham branch in Swope was the perfect way to end my 6-day road trip across Pennsylvania and Virginia, with the Reading and Northern, Nittany and Bald Eagle, Wheeling and Lake Erie, Allegheny Valley Railroad, NS Pittsburgh Line, Shenandoah Valley Railroad, and BB's North Mountain Sub under my belt. I could not have been happier here in Swope. Thanks for railfanning with me today. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful Shenandoah Valley as much as I did.